Launched in 1969, Seafire was the next to last Cal 40 built by Jensen Marine. In 1984, I became her fifth owner, and 14 years later, she began a 4-year restoration and refit. We raced in the 2003 Transpac, finishing 3rd out of 10 in the Cal 40 fleet, and again in 2005 when we took 4th out of 14 in the class. In both years, Seafire won the Dillingham Trophy for First Hawaiian Boat. Keeping a 52-year-old boat seaworthy requires attentive maintenance and repairs to offset entropy. I recently undertook the job of replacing the Beta Marine 38 engine mounts, which hadn't been changed since 2011, and the old ones were making the boat rattle and shake. Cal 40 engines are mounted backwards under the companionway between the quarter berths. A short jack shaft runs from the transmission to a V-drive, which transmits power to the propeller shaft, exiting at the trailing edge of the keel. In redesigning Seafire's interior, I wanted good access all around the engine, so I drew an enclosure with a removable cowl and panels providing for full exposure on all sides. Access to the engine involves removing the ladder, then tilting the cowl enclosure forward and lifting it out of the way. Here's the exposed engine with the transmission facing forward and the jack shaft connecting to the Walter V-drive. Looking forward from the other end gives a view of the alternator, the raw water pump, and the crankshaft pulley, as well as access to the oil and fuel filters. The engine rests on mounts bolted to fiberglass stringers glassed directly to the hull, and holes on the inside faces of the stringers allow access to the mount fasteners. Bolt-on engine brackets rest on the motor mounts, shown here on the starboard side and the port. While access from the top is good, getting to the mount nuts and the engine bracket bolts requires patience and a set of stubby wrenches. On Seafire, it's not necessary to remove the engine from the boat to change the motor mounts. With the weight of the engine supported, the procedure is to remove the 2 bolts holding each mount to the stringer, then unbolt the bracket from the engine and extract the bracket and mount together. Getting at the bracket bolts is challenging, however, and as shown here, it helps to disassemble some engine peripherals, like the throttle linkage. This photo of the port after motor mount bracket shows the access hole in the stringer clearly, as well as giving an idea of why stubby wrenches are necessary. Okay, I was told by a friend of mine that when you want to support the engine while you're changing the engine mounts, a good way to do it is to use a pneumatic lift, namely a child's soccer ball deflated and put underneath the engine and then inflated. And we did this on the front end of the engine. For the other forward 2 motor mounts, worked like a charm. This one's a lot heavier because it's got the transmission on it, but we're going to try it anyway. So we'll take it down and put it underneath and slide it in such a way as to keep the needle valve accessible right there. And then we'll take our handy dandy inflator and are we ready? Let's do it. It's either going to work or not. That should be it. The engine is now up. The nuts underneath on both sides are turning, so the weight is held completely on the soccer ball. And there it sits. Now, I think this works because the engine is still fastened securely at the front by the 2 engine mounts up there, so it can't move either laterally or longitudinally. so that keeps it from rolling off the ball. But it works.
Fantastic.
So I've been working on replacing the motor mounts on Seafire. The motor mounts, just like the name sounds like, are the things that hold the motor to the boat, and they serve the function to absorb a lot of the vibration that the motor sets up when it's running. And I thought it might be interesting to look at a couple of the motor mounts that I've pulled out, just to see what they look like comparatively, and give you an idea of why it is that they needed to be changed. So there's one of these is from the transmission end of the boat, which is where there's probably more vibration and certainly more weight, since it carries not just the engine weight but also the transmission weight. And then the other one is from the front end of the engine, which doesn't bear quite as much weight. And so although I don't have a new motor mount to show you, the one that was on the front of the engine is in a lot better shape and still somewhat serviceable. Basically, the structure of these, there's a base plate that screws into the stringer that the engine rests upon. There's a big rubber block which is affixed securely to the base plate, and then there's a metal guard that sort of goes over the top of the rubber block, and then a stud embedded into the rubber with 15/16 nuts that allow you to adjust the height, and basically the engine rests upon the lower nut. Now you can see, looking at these two, they've obviously seen a lot of wear, but if I put my hand on the metal plate and sort of push it back and forth and twist it, it doesn't move too much. It moves a little bit, but not too much. So that one's actually not in such bad shape. The other one, if I do the same thing, it rocks around and you can hear everything rattling in there. Twists. It's definitely loose. It's not doing its job. And basically what that means is that the engine vibration is going to, if anything, be amplified and be transmitted to the boat, and that's not good for the engine. It's not good for the boat, and not only that, but it's noisy because it makes everything inside rattle. So after 10 years in the boat, that's what happened. That's why I had to change them. So that's what a motor mount is. Well, it took a while, but all the new mounts are installed. I also stripped, sanded, primed, and painted all the engine brackets. I used Lanacoat to protect both the bracket bolts and the mounting fastener nuts and lock washers, so that next time the removal will be uncomplicated by corrosion. You'll notice I taped the bottom adjustment nuts on the mounts to keep them in place during the installation. With the new mounts installed, the next job will be to reinstall the jack shaft between the transmission and the V-drive, and finally to align the engine, the jack shaft, and the propeller shaft. It helps to have the engine at the same height as it was previously, so that alignment can start with at least a roughly close fit. So before I removed the old mounts, I fixed the adjustment nut position of them and transferred that height to the new mounts before installing them. Okay, all 4 new motor mounts are in. All the brackets are once again affixed to the engine block and secured. 2 on the port side, and there's the 2 on the starboard. The ones on the starboard side were relatively easy because it was work. So now it's time to release the Kraken, the soccer ball. So here we're going to once again find the aperture. There is our custom pneumatic engine lift. Job done. With With the new mounts installed, I'll save the alignment process for our next video. Meanwhile, as a reward for enduring all of the maintenance work instead of our usual sailing videos, here's some footage from Seafire's approach to the finish line during the 2005 Transpac. We're in the midst of the Great Seafire Speed Challenge. In this corner, Brian Caldwell. He's current record holder at 14.2 knots.
Scratching at his back.
And there, the challenger, Doug White.
14.1.
Seeking
But he's hungry.
this position of supremacy.
Defending his past Transpac.
Defending his past Transpac title of 16.4.
5 knots?
16.4. And here's the object of their intentions. The fun meter.
Fender's low or fender's high?
This is what it's all about.
Lost concentration, you spilled the coffee. All right,